The online course that you've just completed, I put it together a few years ago. And since then, as with all other technologies, things with fiber optic usage have ramped up, bandwidths have gotten bigger, things like that. And we're going to talk about that in this video. But the first thing I want you to understand is that the basic tenets and precepts of how fiber optics work, and what you saw in the online course, what you learned, it's all still true. It all works exactly the same way. The beauty of fiber is that it's made out of glass, and glass has no half-life. Glass doesn't corrode. Glass doesn't rust. They did a test recently, 2012 or so, where they tested fibers that were manufactured in 1987 and installed in Wisconsin. This was a phone company doing the test. They're single-mode fibers, high-bandwidth single-mode fibers, all single-modes, high-bandwidth stuff. They tested the quality of the fibers that were made in 1987 versus the same lengths of fiber made in the year 2011 or 2012. And guess what? They tested exactly the same. Older fibers, properly terminated and taken care of, they'll work just fine. They could be 20 years old, they could be 30 years old. They'll still work. You have to be able to match the connectors and such. But the things you learned in the online course are all true. That's how fiber works. Now, what we're going to do in this video presentation, this video update, is talk about some of the things that have changed, or some of the things that technologies have been added to fiber optics as we know it. The good news is it's a great time to be a fiber optic technician. It's a great time to understand fiber optics and be prepared to work with it, because the usage of fiber optics is growing explosively. Fiber optics is being installed to the home by the phone companies and the cable companies. AT&T just put single-mode fiber into my house. Fiber optics is being used extensively in data centers, but between telecom closets and to hook up different buildings. Fiber optics is being used in all kinds of commercial circumstances and, in some cases, residential circumstances. So what's driving this enormous requirement or usage of fiber is bandwidth needs and requirements. Who knew 15 years ago, when Netflix was a disc you got in the mail, that someday you'd be downloading movies directly to your TV via Wi-Fi through your high-speed internet connection, and all of that stuff depends on fiber. Same with your smartphones, same with any kind of connectivity that happens in our world today. It's hooked up with fiber in some part of the communication link, and therefore it's a great time to be a fiber optic technician. There's a lot of use of fiber and a growing need and use for fiber today. Now, one of the places that is growing is the fact that Ethernet, we started off at 10 megabit Ethernet, then we went to 100 megabit Ethernet, then we went to gigabit Ethernet, then we went to 10 gigabit Ethernet, then we went to 25 gigabit Ethernet, and then there's 40 gigabit Ethernet, and they're planning 100 gigabit Ethernet right now. Why? Because who knew back in the old days, 10, 15 years ago, that there'd be such a requirement and need for bandwidth? And to facilitate that, fiber optics gets used, because fiber optics has higher bandwidth than copper cable. It's just that simple. So higher bandwidth means more fibers installed. There are two things that have changed in the fiber optic world since the original online course was produced. The first one is, rather than using the 62.5 micron standard multimode, most all installations now, new fiber installations, are using the blue stuff, or they call it aqua. These are 50 micron multimode fibers. The core size is a little bit smaller. It's not 62.5 microns, it's 50 microns. Why are people putting in this 50 micron fiber? The 50 micron fiber what really drove this was the development of something called a VCSEL laser. Lasers transmit data and provide bigger bandwidth communications than LEDs do. Lasers blink on and off faster than LEDs do. And if something can blink faster, because that's all that's happening in a fiber, whether it's an LED or a laser, it's a blinking light going here and there's a receiver seeing it, right? But if I can blink faster, I can send more data, right? So the development of the VCSEL laser created the need and desire for a different kind of fiber. Now the VCSEL laser, the beauty of the VCSEL laser is they're inexpensive lasers. The lasers used in fiber optics for single mode and previously were relatively expensive, where the VCSEL lasers were relatively inexpensive. So hey, now we can use lasers in multi-mode fiber installations. They use the 50 micron stuff because it's kind of like a garden hose. You have a garden hose, you got water coming out, and you take your hand and you squeeze it around the end, the water goes further. Well, having that smaller core keeps the laser light in closer together, the light rays closer together, and gives us more bandwidth. Now, most all installations, whatever they're going to use it for, even if they're just going to use it for 100 megabit Ethernet or analog camera or whatever they're going to use it for, they're going to generally specify and use the 50 micron stuff. It doesn't cost any more than the old 62.5 micron did. Now there are two flavors of 50 micron fiber. One of them is OM3, optical fiber level 3, and then OM4. Now, laser optimized fiber, or optimized OM, optimized multimode 3 or 4, OM3 fiber will give you the ability to transmit up to 10 gigabit Ethernet over 300 meters of distance, roughly 900 feet. Great, that's OM3. OM4 fiber gives you the ability to transmit 25 and 40 gigabit Ethernet, as well as the lower speeds, the lower bandwidth internet, Ethernets, the 100 meg, the gigabit, 10 gigabit. But this will go up to 40 gigabits if it's OM4, but the distance is 125 meters. Now, in most cases, we don't have to worry about these things if we're doing, 100 feet from a telecom closet to a telecom closet. But what this does mean is that if you're specifying the cable, and this is where you can differentiate your company from other companies in terms of the sales process, you can say, well, Mr. Customer, we always install OM4 multimode fiber. Why? Because it's better. It will last longer. If you ever want to go to 25 or 40 gigabit Ethernet, you can. Or 100 gigabit Ethernet, 40 or 100 gigabit Ethernet, you can on these fibers. And you can do it 10 years from now. You can do it 12 years from now. Because as long as the fibers are installed properly and not disturbed, they'll still be good. So, this is the major change in the industry. The use of 50 micron laser optimized multimode fiber. Now the other change that came along with that pretty much simultaneously was the adoption and use of mostly all of LC connectors, Larry Charlie connectors. Now why do we use these Larry Charlie connectors? A connector is a connector. They all do the same thing. They bring two fiber ends together, or a fiber into a piece of optoelectronics, right? The Larry Charlies are used for a couple of reasons. One, the primary reason is size. They are smaller, they're thinner. And this means that the devices they hook into can be smaller. Or the patch panel that they're hooking into, you can put more of them on that patch panel within the same distance or the same length. More of these than you can put of the round type of connectors or the square Sam Charlie ones. So this is why the LC connector has become pretty much the standard for new fiber optic installations. You're putting in new fiber links, you're going to terminate them. Nowadays you'll terminate them primarily with the LCs. Now the STs and SCs are still used. They work just fine. There's no difference in performance between this connector and this connector. The performance depends on the installation quality, who did it and how well they did it. But there's no difference in the performance of it, okay? But it's a difference in size, okay? So this is the one everybody's using now, are the LC connectors. People are using the LCs because of their size and because of the way they work. But there are some issues when you're using LCs, particularly when you're trying to mate older, previously installed fiber links that have, say, the ST connectors, and you want LC connectors on the newer stuff that you're doing. But at some point, you may have to try to do this, which is bring your ST and your LC together in a barrel. That's a problem. If you look closely at these connectors, you'll see that the ferrule tips, this one here is the ST, this one here is the LC. The ferrule tip on the SC is 2.5 millimeters across. The ferrule tip on the LC is 1.25 millimeters across. It's half the size. And because of that geometry, we can't do this, okay? They don't make adapter barrels that will do this properly. It just can't be done. So what you have to do is you have to get made, or make them yourself. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. You have to get made jumpers if you're jumping from one type of connector to the other. They're hybrid jumpers. That on one end there's an LC, and the other end there's an ST or an SC type of connector. Generally, these will be factory made. Generally, you'll buy them, and they're inexpensive. It might cost you $6 a piece or $8 a piece. They don't cost a lot of money, but you can't mate the older style connectors directly onto the LC connectors unless you've got a jumper cable that makes that change for you, that changes the ferrule size for you. So that's something to watch for if you're working on adding to an existing fiber optic plant or hooking up to existing fiber equipment with devices that need LC connections to provide connectivity. Another thing that's improved more as a gradual thing, as opposed to this, we're going from 62.5 micron fiber to 50 micron fiber, which is pretty big change. The manufacturers of the connectors, the splices, the fusion splicers, they're making their equipment better and better, and they're also making it less expensive than it used to be. So if you, for example, in the videos you're going to see, you'll see me installing the Brilliance connectors from West Penn Wire. These connectors are great, and they're not inexpensive, but they work, and they're very sure. When you put them on, you know they're going to work. You'll also see me using a splicer called an Easy Fusion Splicer. Excellent piece of equipment, works great, and where fusion splicers used to be $10,000 and up, this splicer is $1,700. Still not cheap, but a whole lot less than it used to be. Things like OTDRs, optical loss test sets, all the things that we need to do fiber optic work and to do fiber optic testing, in general, prices have reduced, quality has gone up, and usability, the ability for a technician who, let's say, has limited experience, or let's say doesn't do it every day, to be able to be successful in installing a mechanical splice or a fusion splice or a fiber connector. The ability to do that is enhanced when the connections are made more sure and are simplified. The tools are better. The devices, the jigs and the things that hold the splices and hold the connectors, all these things have evolved over time to become better for the technicians. Easier to use, faster to use, more sure to use. So that's really on the equipment end of it, or the technician tool end of it, that's where the improvements have come in fiber optics in the last 5 years or so.